is ended. The Atari 8-bit podcast.
Hangman was sort of the obvious game for people to submit, and if I recall, the obvious business application was, the personal finance and record keeping, budget programs.
Hi, I'm Kevin Savitz, and this is an interview episode of Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. Tom Briscoe worked at Atari as an intern in the summer of 1981, where he evaluated the user-written software that was submitted to Atari Program Exchange. This interview took place on September 26, 2015.
I understand that you you evaluated software submissions to Atari Program Exchange.
That's right. Back in 1980, after my freshman year of college, I went down to Sunnyvale with my brother and started looking for a summer job and went door to door. I had been studying computer science and came to Atari and met a man there named Paul Cubbage, and talked with him a little bit about what I was doing, what I'd been looking for in school. And he, at that time, they were planning to get going on the Atari Program Exchange. And so they hadn't hired any summer interns before, but we connected, and so I was the first summer intern at Atari with the task of screening, taking a first pass at primarily game submissions that came in through the Atari Program Exchange.
So this is summer of what year?
This was the summer of 1980. Summer of 81. Sorry, I forgot about that. So
did you have an appointment to see Paul, or did you just show up? And
No, it was a cold call. I mean, I went to a number of different companies. I hadn't really. I was walking door to door, in a shirt and tie in Silicon Valley as an 18-year-old, and just making cold calls. And I guess Paul thought that was, worth talking to me, and so we did, and ended up going there. Now, the Atari Program Exchange, basically, it was primarily related to the Atari 400 and 800, and so that time, I think most of the programs there would be submitted on a 5 1/4-inch floppy, and so I saw a lot of Hangman games, and those didn't make it very far. But obviously, the final judges didn't want to have to go through all of the game submissions, and so that was my job, was to go through, play the games. If they worked, sort of evaluate if they were interesting, fun, worthy of further review by the judges.
So how much stuff was there? I mean, we're talking stacks and stacks of software. How many did you do a day? How long did you spend with each program?
This is quite a long time ago, so I don't remember how many per day. But I had a little office, with the Atari computers, and it wasn't like I had 20, 30 programs a day. I might get. It varied from day to day. I mean, these were coming in by mail, if I recall correctly. I mean, we had the internet at that time, but people weren't usually submitting anything over there. that. And so however many there came in, I would load them up, try them. I would say, within 10 or 15 minutes max, you would be able to see whether or not the program worked at all, if it had any bugs, if it seemed interesting. And if it did seem interesting, you might spend a little more time on it.
Was this a paid internship or just a more getting experience sort of deal?
It was paid. When I tell people about I was a software evaluator at Atari, I say, wow, that was a dream job, for a 18-year-old young man. But I think more important than the gaming aspect was, the people I worked with. I think after I had been there for a while, there was another young man, college student that they hired. So there must have been enough work for two of us. And if I recall, I was paid something like $8 an hour or something. Yeah, but that, for 1981, that was pretty good.
Yeah. So was it a dream job or was it just a job?
Oh, it was great. Paul Cubbage is an entrepreneur. He's innovative. After I finished at Atari, I went and I went on a church mission to Spain for a couple of years, and didn't really have communication with anybody. I think when I was at Atari, they had about 6,000 employees, and then when I came back, they had about 600. And so I contacted Paul and I said, hey, are you still working at Atari? And he had gone to another startup called Mindset, which is another gaming company. And, we've maintained friendship over these 30 years. And every now and then we'll have a sort of a technology philosophy phone call. But so I have to say, I loved Atari. I liked the other people there, but the thing that was really most valuable was Paul and his insight and friendship over these years. And Atari was it was interesting to see how Atari, when the IBM PC came out, and then people started, migrating to that platform as the industry default for PC games. Then Atari seemed to move more to the consoles and cartridges, and kind of just tapered off with regard to the the personal computers.
Right. So dredging back in your mind, you mentioned you looked at a bunch of Hangman games. I would like to know if there's any other specifics that you can remember about stuff that you looked at, stuff that was particularly bad or particularly good, or just anything at all.
Yeah. So they're trying to remember. There was a book out, Day Ray Atari, all about Atari, and the author of the book had certain, and he would give us lectures, and he was quite a dynamic person. I don't remember his name. Maybe you know it, but
Chris Crawford. That's probably who you're talking
about. Yeah, that's right. And some of I can't remember the details of specific games. I mean, the Hangman comes to mind because it's a relatively simple game, and those ones didn't make it past. But what I do remember is the arcade games that were kind of popular at the time. Centipede was a big arcade game at the time. It had been out for a while. And I would say that the quality of the games that we received was kind of normally distributed, but skewed to the low quality. But then every now and then we'd get a few standouts, and they were not exactly like Centipede, but they were similar in the game action, the quality of the graphics. I mean, obviously on the 400 and 800, the graphics quality wasn't quite the same as it was on the arcade modules where they had better graphics hardware, but there were some that were really impressive. If I, I don't know if there were any of the Apx Winner Magazines that you have access to. I don't have them anymore, but that might jog my memory. I just remember thinking, wow, this is really good. And I think in some cases they were from pretty young programmers. I'm not talking about young teens, but still, teenagers or early 20s programmers who obviously had put a lot of time into some of the games.
What haven't I asked you about that summer that I should have?
Atari was a leader at the, Atari was pretty big those days in Sunnyvale. And, Nolan Bushnell and Pong were pretty old by then. And so this was really kind of the heyday. And if the IBM PC hadn't come along, then, you would have probably seen still this diversity of platforms between, Commodore PET and, the Atari. And Atari put a lot of effort and development work into, faster graphics, good game action. I seem to remember they had sprites, or there were certain hardware acceleration techniques that they used to make it easier to have good game action even while programming, the hardware acceleration. I think there were some features like that built into the processors, or maybe they weren't in the processors themselves, but into
there were some separate processors that did graphic stuff that made it stand out. Yeah.
It wasn't all games. I mean, there were some business applications, like, Hangman was sort of the obvious game for people to submit, and if I recall, the obvious business application was, the personal finance and record keeping. A lot of people had submitted things, budget programs.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that's in this catalog as a winner, I probably reviewed. And then it came, I'm just saying that these are what's in the catalog is what the judges chose, for publication. And so we would have, if you look at how many catalog pages there were, looks like...
this first one there, not too many.
About 20 pages or less. And so if you think about, 19, probably about 18 pages with probably 3 or 4 programs per page, this was the the very start. I mean, this was the App Store for Atari. It really was a precursor to, kind of user community, open source innovation. I guess that's the other thing, a takeaway, is that this business model of gathering community developed applications, applying some kind of quality standard to them, and then making them available to the broader community really does, was sort of a foreshadowing of, the iTunes App Store, and because unlike other archives of this type, like download.com, which used to be CNET,
Mm-hmm.
this was basically, there was a measure of, it was platform specific, like the Apple stuff is. It had, again, some degree of quality control, and not just quality control, but the ratings weren't made by the user community. They were made internally, but still there was some thoughtfulness into, we only want to put things in our catalog in that that are going to appeal to the users. So I guess that's another insight that, how many years, 20 plus years before Apple had this business model, Atari did.
Yeah, they did. Cool.
So, I don't know if there's anything else, but it brings back good memories.
Awesome. No, that's exactly what I needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.